Here.
Scott Gergen.
There, I can hit the button. I'm here.
Welcome, Scott. Lisa Hadid. Brian Davis.
Here.
Becky Beisel, we know she's gone today. Stephanie Malm is here. And Kelsey Waits.
Here. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Same sign. And carries. And you know what? This does remind me, when we are taking votes, if you can make sure that you turn your audio on for those votes, because it's difficult for Becky to see if someone is just raising their hand for a vote, since there are so many screens going. And so if you can make sure to make that audible, that would be absolutely wonderful. All right. So do we have an approval of the minutes from the May 20th regular board meeting?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, so just a recognition of the visitors. We do have a couple of folks on the call with us today who are going to be presenting, and so thank you for coming. And to anyone watching us on Facebook, either live or after the fact, thank you for tuning in and watching the school board meeting. And as always, please feel free to reach out with questions. All right, so moving right along, we have some good news items. So I don't know, Bob, do you want me to take all of it? This is kind of our first meeting here with our new superintendent, Dr. McDowell. So welcome as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think, Kelsey, it makes sense for you to take those.
Okay. So we had a very successful senior graduation. There was a very high turnout with cars, with the students coming by, and they really seemed to enjoy it. I know Mike Johnson had gotten a lot of feedback from folks saying thank you and that they really appreciated the event. I enjoyed being there, and it was really wonderful to still have kind of that personal send-off for students by calling their name. And so I'm glad that we could pull that together and make it work. At the middle school, we also had a send-off parade at the middle school as well as the parades at the elementary sites, which were really great for the kids and for the teachers as well, to kind of see the students one more time in person in a way, and just to get that connection for the end of the year. We also had a retirement parade for those employees who retired during the 1920 school year. And I just want to say that if you go to Board Book and you can look this up, the amount of years of service that these folks have put into our district and our schools is absolutely incredible. And so with the 10 employees on here, they have a combined total of 269 years of service. So on average, that's about 27 years per person who retired. And I just think that's absolutely amazing. A number of these folks have been with the district since the 1980s, and they've just, contributed and been a part of schools, and we very much appreciate them. And so I do just want to make sure we can read their names and just acknowledge them. Tim Collins, Kathy Keys, Carrie Schmitz, Marcia Crandall, Jim Huberti, Pat Rebarchek, Dana Liebrand, Susan Hurlem, Julie Malm, and Jane Matson. So thank you all for being committed to this district and, being a part of our district family for so long. And we really appreciate you, and we wish you well in retirement. So, have any comments or things to add there? All right. Items for discussion. So we'll go into the wellness survey presentation. with Mary Ellen. And so be sharing your screen with us, correct?
I will, yes. So
Okay.
I'm Mary Ellen Fox, and I'm the Health Services Coordinator for the Hastings School District nurse. And part of my job is to be the chair of the Student Wellness Committee, and we're called the Smart Choices Committee. It was 2015, but I can't remember for sure that there was an update done to the student wellness policy. It's wellness policy number 533. And in it, one of the requirements is that there is an annual report given to the school board. So that is what this is. So I'm going to share with you the student wellness report. And this can be found on the school website. If you go to our website and you go under, I'm going to not say this very well, but under the, actually the food services, the Smart Choices website is on the bottom left side of the column, left column, and then you click on that and you go under news and you can find this report. So here we go. So here is the report. This year, it's been an unusual year, as you know. We've had parent newsletters were sent out that included various things to parents, and actually went to all parents in the entire district, which was wonderful. We've been researching something called Move Mindfully, which is a way of helping kids to help with their stress, but also do movement. And so we're looking at getting a grant through the SHIP grants. And so we had some of our staff went to a training to experience that. And it's something that the state is going to continue doing, SHIP grants. So we are going to be applying this fall for that, to have that as an initiative in the elementary schools. As part of the survey, to give you this report, we needed to do some type of survey to figure out how we are doing. And so we chose this year to survey students. And so right now, that's what you're going to be hearing about, is how students responded to the survey. And then our committee met 4 times, and our 4th meeting was via Zoom, which was a successful meeting. So students at the elementary schools were asked when they were home during COVID distance learning to 3rd and 4th graders at the elementary schools were surveyed, and then also middle and high school students in their FIAD classes were asked to do this again during distance learning. And if you click on the link, and school board members, I did send you an email with this. Hopefully you got it. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it ahead of time or not, but there, I'm going to click on this. So the elementary students basically said they feel pretty active. These are different activities that they've done, and they've had. They're saying, we wanted to know how many kids were getting breakfast and lunch from the school district. So that was we actually added that question this year. And Kennedy had a huge response of more kids responded from Kennedy than the other 2 elementary schools. But basically what this is saying is that more kids got the lunches than didn't get the lunches. And then this doesn't read very well, but students are eating some fruits and vegetables, and they are being pretty active. The question that I really zero in on is, do they feel safe? And, right here, you can see that the total number of kids here pretty much feel pretty safe. Now they're at home, so that's the other thing that's a little weird. So the survey was taken last year and this year and previous years, and I'll just go back to that in a minute. But so anyway, in the elementary world, 70% of the students were getting lunch or breakfast either consistently or sometimes during distance learning. 93% of the kids feel safe or mostly safe. 98% of elementary students listed at least one physical activity they do outside of gym or recess. There is some concern about what's going to happen with COVID. And so we're looking at how we can provide some support for mental health in the when we come back to school. Middle school is very similar, and also high school. Strengths are that we have a lot of physical activity, that a lot of the kids, large majority of the students feel safe, and room for improvement is provide healthier food. At least that's what they say. Now, last night I compared, this is the one survey I was able to do this with really successfully, is compare last year's results to this year's results with the middle school kids. And this is actually striking to me. Granted, last year kids were in school when they did this, and this year they were at home. So I'm not quite sure what that means. And it was also a different group of kids, because the kids that were 8th graders last year moved to be 9th graders this year. So it's not the exact same group of kids, but across the board, everything, the percentages are up. So they're saying the food is healthier this year. They have more opportunities to be physically active. And I don't know if this means when they're at home or if their perception of food at school is healthier. They're saying that they have healthier coping skills this year to manage their stress. They're saying they are less stressed now than last year. And the bottom one, I feel safe at school. This is the agree and strongly agree. Last year, 70% of kids said they felt they agreed with that statement. This year, 90% said that. And when you look at the high school results, it's actually, it's very similar. It's 85% of the high school students say they feel always or mostly safe. So that, I don't know, it's just, that was very interesting to me. So our goals for this next year would be to use the information that we got from the student surveys to help guide our goals for next year. We're going to support efforts for emotional and well-being, mental health well-being as we transition back in the fall to whatever school looks like in the fall. We are going to be moving forward with applying for the SHIP grant for Move Mindfully. We will continue the parent newsletter communication. And I'd like to include next year's student wellness survey to ask the question of gender and diversity, because that is something that we don't have information on. And though 90% of the students say they feel safe, there's still 10% that don't feel safe, and in a range of things. So I think we really want to have all of our students feel safe. And then we would like to explore some opportunities for health education in the elementary levels. So that is the nuts and bolts of it. If you want to go back and look at this, this is on our website, like I said. You can look at the actual student comments. Some of the ones that I felt from the high school that were particularly interesting. One student said they wanted to have a course added that's dedicated to teaching just about nutrition. They thought, another student said, talk more about how to manage and cope with stress. Let's see here, teach students how to manage stress and mental illnesses like depression, teach ways we could be less addicted to our cell phones, make gym mandatory all 4 years, improve on getting vapes completely removed, because I know that vaping has been an issue in the school. Have a program that encourages people in minority groups to report harassment and bullying they experience anonymously, and then they wanted to have some consequences built into that. Those were ones that kind of jumped out to me that were comments from some of the high school students. What questions do you have?
I really like that you want to add in the questions about gender and diversity, just as we try to figure out if there's a connection between the students who don't feel safe, if there's kind of a common thread there, or if there's, I mean, maybe there isn't a relationship there, but I think having more information to try to tease that out is important as we try to make our schools safer for all of our kiddos. So I really appreciate that. I had to point that out. Other questions?
Hey, Mary Ellen, one of the things that I kind of got the gist of from your presentation, and also I just kind of heard through the grapevine of my own kids and some of the kids they know and parents, is that it seemed like there was a cohort of kids that actually thrived in this distance learning environment. And I'm wondering if you or your group give any thought to why that might be. Is this something where they feel safer in their own homes? Is this something where, socially speaking, at school, things haven't gone the best? So they were actually saying, well, thank goodness, I don't have to be worried about social issues at school or being bullied or whatever's happening. Have you given any thought to why it is that the kids were so comfortable at home worth that?
If you go out and look at some of those responses, I think that some of the students spoke to that they didn't have to deal with those particular angles of stress this last bit of school, which to me then says all the more. I mean, not only do we have the stress of going back and being together and the concerns about infection, but then we also have that added layer of anxiety that some people very truly experience in the school setting. So yes, I think that is a real thing. And I do know that there's some students that were thriving with distance learning. Others that were not. There's others that are lost.
I just think it's something that obviously we're going to have a focus on. I think that one thing that this did bring about is probably some learning that we may not have seen as obviously as we get to see now. Go through it for a few months the way we did.
One other kind of, I don't know if you guys have thought of it this way, but one of the reasons why I think that the distance learning was successful this time was because we already had the established rapport in all of the classes with the teachers. That will not be the case this fall. So that is an additional concern or a layer of concern that we really need to be cognizant of as we're starting the fall. Is how do you build those relationships, not knowing for sure. I mean, we're going to be in kind of this quagmire of how do we start out the school year? Yes, we're going to be in classrooms, but will the classes actually be together? I don't know that they will. So that's going to be a real challenge.
Anyone else have any questions or comments about the survey? Lisa?
I just want to comment that I appreciate showing even though it was very different experiences from when the survey was given last to students and when it was given this year, I appreciated seeing that data side to side, and I positive. I feel positive about how the majority of our students feel in our building. Obviously, there's always areas for improvement. I like that in particular, the number of students that commented on being active. I mean, when you look through the comments, they're kind of funny, you know, playing with baby goats, but that just felt very positive, and it felt to me it represented the students actually engaging with the survey. I mean, that is the kind of an answer that an elementary student would give.
Right.
So I felt like they actively engaged, and it was positive.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you for all of your work on this, as always. And look forward to kind of, any more updates that come from it. So
Thank you for the time.
Thanks,
all
Mary
right,
Ellen.
thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Next is the official district things update. The attachment is kind of the information from Washington schools and how much they were charging. I will say, as an update, I recently signed on to the Hastings Journal, and I was number 402. And so, we talked about needing 400 people in the area, and that was a number of weeks ago. And so if we do want to put out an RFP, it sounds like they do have enough
Hey, Kelsey.
Yeah.
So today we looked a little bit further into the state statute, and there's a state statute that says that basically to be a qualified newspaper, they have to meet, like the circulation requirement like you referenced, but it's also that they have to have met those conditions for at least 1 year. So we
Oh,
no
okay.
longer feel that this new newspaper is an option. So we would be recommending that for the 2021 school year, we go with Pioneer Press. And then
Okay.
for 21-22, we would reevaluate and possibly look at using the new one.
Okay, that sounds good. Argue with statute, so that's all right. Have any questions about it there?
Does that have to become an action item then, Jen? Do we have to take a
It
board
should be an
action on?
action item, yes.
Okay, so we'll need to move that down to the action items.
Yeah, so I would move that designation of the official district posting become an action item for tonight, if that's appropriate practice.
All right. Do we need to officially move that? Like make a motion for that? I don't. Robert's rules.
I think Lisa just did make a motion.
Well, but then do we need a second? I mean,
Uh,
if we needed to make an official motion, then I need to get a second on it.
Yep, I will second that if needed.
Okay. Okie dokie. Discussion about that?
Just
Bob,
to
you're
point-
muted. I don't know
Yeah,
if you said
just to point out that this ties us in just for the short term. So if the Hastings Journal becomes a viable option, down the road,
Right.
we can certainly pivot.
But right now, we're just moving this to action items.
Right.
Or, yeah, so.
Yep.
All right. So all those in favor of moving this to an action item, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So we will bring that down to the action items. I have a note for myself, but Becky, if you can help remind me, since it's not in board book, it's so easy to look that. Next up, summer community food security update.
Yeah, so I'll give that update. And then I also have Brittany Hirschauer on tonight too, so that if you guys have additional questions, we should be able to answer them. I am going to share my screen really quick. Do you see my PowerPoint? Yes? Okay. So we just wanted to give a quick update of what we did in June. So we had meals available to all children 18 and under without charge. There was a sign up required. It was breakfast and lunch, and it was available for pickup on Mondays, and they would get 3 days worth of meals. And then also on Wednesdays, they would get 2 days worth. And we had 6 locations, and you can just kind of see those locations and the times. And we were doing approximately 2,500 meals per week. So I feel like that's a pretty substantial number. As we look into July, what we're to do is to continue to make them available to all children 18 and under without charge. Sign up still being required, still the same days, Mondays, and they would get 3 days worth, Wednesdays, 2 days worth. But in July, we'll have to move to just 3 locations. And those are really the approved locations based on the area eligibility requirements. And we have submitted applications to use the additional sites that we had in June, but they have not yet been approved by MDE. So again, it's not really something that we have a choice in. We're only able to use an approved location. And then we're looking just to reevaluate again in August to determine if the need is still there and if the sites are, meeting the needs and the hours and all of that. Questions there, Lisa?
Which of the sites, do 1 or 2 of the sites have the consistently highest use? And if we lose those, I think it was 3 sites, how many people does that seem to impact based on June practice?
Yeah, so the district office has been the most used site, and that will continue. Our Saviors has also had a large number, and that one will continue. And then we're adding in the high school, but you can see we'll be dropping off Hastings Family Service, Crossroads, St. John's, and Pleasant Hill Library. So I don't know that I have those numbers right in front of me, but Brittany, you could maybe speak to that.
Sure. So the district office has traditionally been the highest number that we're serving. After that, it typically it's kind of a toss-up, but Our Saviors is usually the one that's the second one. Crossroads is sometimes up there a little bit too, but typically it's district office and Our Saviors. And then Hastings Family Services averages about 30. Crossroads Church is around 40. St. John the Baptist Catholic School has been about 15 every week. And Pleasant Hill Library, that's the one that kind of fluctuates between the 30 and 40 mark. And that's how many families we typically have picking up at those locations.
Thank you. So then the other piece of information I wanted to share tonight is just, we've sent this out to families in a mailing. We're also having it available at our meal pickup sites, but there are some additional food benefits available in Minnesota. So it's for families whose children were between the ages of 5 and 18 on September 1, 2019, and received free or reduced meals during the 1920 school year. There's an additional $325 per child in funding available to help pay for groceries. There is an application that families would have to fill out, and the link is on there, and there is a deadline of June 30th. So we're getting close to that. We have tried to share this information multiple ways.
Okay.
All I have on that one.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Lisa?
All right, this is a problem with split screen. I can't get my mouse in the right place. I think this is maybe a question for Brittany. And just to confirm that we've had both sufficient staff. I know there's an MOU later in our action items tonight, and that you feel good about the food supply chain. That's just an assessment of current practice, current status.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So yes, we do have, I believe we have enough staff. We have about 14 people, and we're doing a rotating schedule for everybody. So every week we rotate so everybody's able to work. That seems to have worked out really well. And right now, food supply chain, haven't had, I need to knock on wood as I say this, because everybody I've talked to is having issues. But what I did is at the beginning of the year, when I knew that we were going to start doing this, when I came on board, started working with Jen and with our food supplier, and we looked into getting prepackaged items. And since we have our wonderful warehouse, I did some stocking up of some things so that could stay frozen. And we're just doing your typical summer meals for the students. As of right now, I haven't had any issues getting items in.
Wonderful, thank you. Other questions? All right, sounds good. Thank you for all of your work on this, and keep us posted, I guess. Hopefully it continues to help our families. Next up is our CARES Act impact and update on upcoming fund transfers. And this is you again.
Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things. Okay, so let's see. So here, for the CARES Act, the Hastings Public School District is receiving about $350,000. There's two different funds that it's coming from, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, and then the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, but the total is the $350,000. The guidance that we've received is that the emergency assistance is for COVID-19 related needs in our schools, such as meeting the needs of historically underserved population, mental health supports, technology and access, cleaning supplies and materials, summer learning needs, or other local needs. The time period to spend these dollars is from March 13th, 2020 through September 30th, 2022. So as a district, we have started conversations to identify proposed uses, and some of those possibilities include professional development, summer planning time for fall preparedness, one-to-one technology initiative, reviewing internal facility use and COVID preparedness plans, and possibly the 1920 fund transfer to community education for the emergency child care. Kind of leads us right into the next topic of the fund balance transfer. So we had talked about before that per the executive order, school districts were required to provide care to eligible children during the school day free of charge. Upon school board approval, school districts are authorized to transfer operating funds for the cost of providing that care. Community education staff provided this care from March 23rd through June 5th. So the approximate amount of that transfer is going to be $143,000. And that's based on a 50% kind of cost sharing between the district and community ed. That transfer and resolution needs to be completed by November 30th at the same time as like our end of fiscal year financial report. So we'll look to bring that forward again, probably in August or September. The number though is pretty much finalized, the $143,000. Any questions there?
No, so even covering that, then we'll have about $200,000 left to discuss the use of and where that goes.
Yeah.
Great. Right. Does anyone have any questions or comments about all of that? You know, we have a lot of unknowns coming up for what the fall is going to look like. So I feel better knowing that we have something there to kind of work with this summer should we need to do additional planning for the fall. Right. All right, so then next up is the recommended budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
So I'm going to share that document also. It is in board book, oops, and it's also in, it's also on our website. Okay, do you guys see the budget document? Yes, okay. So this will be the adopted budget for 2021. Timeline we've reviewed before. I guess, you know, the only thing I'll add is that, you know, we'll continue to improve this over time. But for right now, this is our budget timeline. I won't go through it detailed. Page is basically the same that we reviewed at the May work session. There's just been some very minor changes. Overall total is not changing a whole lot. But if we look at our adjusted pupil units for 2021, the total is 4,710, which is about 18 less than what we had in 1920. And again, that number is based on our prior year October 1 MARS data and then projected forward based on prior year data trends. On October 1, 2020, a new projection will be done for 2021 and future years. So as far as the revenues go for the general fund unassigned, the general ed formula increased 2%. The total there was about 400,000. We no longer have Harbor Shelter, so that's a decrease, and we also will no longer have the Solar Garden sign-up bonus, so that's a total of 220,000. The athletic participation fees that were approved at the last board meeting, that increases our revenues by about 35,000. And then our special ed aid is going up by about 228,000. So our total change to the revenue budget is 437,741. When we look at the expenditures for the unassigned budget, our payroll expenditures, so teachers contract, they allowed for moving a step and 1.95% was added to the salary schedule. There is an estimated savings for 4 resignations or retirements in there. The principals, admins, and supervisors are still an estimate, so those contracts have not been settled. And then all other contracts are per negotiation estimates, which is moving 1 step and 2.5% to the salary schedule. And then our health insurance increased 2% also for 2021. So the total of all of that is 880,000. And then we had some staffing increases that were since the 1920 revised budget. You can see what those are, and I won't read them all off, but they do total just over $1 million. The one thing to note on that is that we are being conservative at this point and kind of waiting to see what the fall might bring before we're filling some of those positions. So it's a possibility that not all of those positions will be filled. Expenditures, so purchase services, that's with District 917, that's increasing 118,000 approximately. Our property and liability insurance is still an estimate, and we have another action item later tonight to approve those, but that is a significant increase. It's going up $93,000. Health, we've added 2 FTE. And then communities in the schools, 1 FTE, so that's another 56,000. And then just other miscellaneous programs throughout the district are $9,000. So the total change to the expenditure budget is 2.68 million, and that net change from the previous budget is 1,730,560 that we are overspending. Our fund balances, so our actual 18-19 ending fund balance was 13.5 million. Our projected for 19-20 is just a small increase, so approximately 13.6 million. And then the projected ending fund balance for 2021 will be $11,910,000. So this revised budget will be done in the fall, and it needs to be updated for the following items. So the actual student enrollment, staffing due to student numbers, principal, administrator, supervisor contract, final negotiated amounts, actual hires versus the estimated salaries for the open positions, the property and liability insurance. So you'll see what I have getting approved later tonight is a worst case scenario. They're still working on negotiating that rate, and we anticipate it going down a little bit, but that will be updated. There'll be a new study for the GASB OPEB pension accumulated sick leave study. The legislative changes to revenue and expenditure calculations, if any, and then adjustments based on our audit for 19-20. The last item I have is the CARES funding that we just talked about. I don't have that in this budget, basically because we do have to write a grant or, write a grant application identifying what we'll use those dollars on, and then we'll have corresponding expenses. So I'll add those into the revised. And then I also don't have some of the unknown COVID-related expenditures. So we don't know at this point exactly what scenario instruction will be under in the fall, but we would do an update at that point. I can just kind of keep going, and then at the end, if you have questions, we can address them. So this page, you know, this section here is all of our restricted fund balances. So those are all accounts that we can only use the dollars for a specified reason. In that, we actually have a pretty healthy balance. It's when we get to the unrestricted that we're overspending. So again, you know, this was our projected fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. Our revenues are about 49 million. Our expenditures are 41. So it's overspending by 1.6 million. We keep kind of just looking through this document. There's a lot of detail in here that I won't cover everything, but just know that, you know, you can go back and look at it by fund. So Fund 2, Fund 4, 6, 7, and then all of the trust funds are identified. This revenue is by source. I think the key thing to mention there is that, you know, again, we're getting the majority of our revenue through state aids. It's about 76.23%. When we look at our expenditures by object, if you add up the salaries and wages, the employee benefits, and the purchase services, that comes to 96.66% of our budget. So that's all of our people type expenses. The next page is just for the other funds. So it'll show food service and community ed, same way, same with the expenditures. And then the expenditures by program, if you add up all the instructional and instructional support, that comes to about 82.14% of our budget. So we're definitely spending the money in the instruction and support areas. Our staffing is increasing for 2021. So this has an additional community ed teacher built into it. It has an additional 3rd grade teacher, the 3 additional special ed teachers, the board certified behavioral analysis position. It's got an increase of 0.4 for a speech teacher, a 0.5 for an ESL. Got the middle school counselor and the high school psych that were approved recently. This page will kind of look at this in another way, but here's all of our, well, I guess the one thing I'll mention on that last page is just that we do have a referendum that will expire at the end of the 23-24 school year. So you can see here that that revenue goes down. So we'll need to, you know, come up with a plan prior to that. And then if we look at the enrollment, so here's 2021 grades pre-K through 12 will be at 4,285. And then you can see that the enrollment is decreasing. So into 21-22, there's a decrease of about 17.59. But then into 22-23, there's a decrease of 62.02. And then at this point, 23-24 is a small decrease of about 6. And then 24-25, again, it's a decrease of about 41. So we do have to continue to prepare for the decreased enrollment. At this point, I can take any questions.
All right, so from my screen now, I can't see if anyone's raising their hand, so feel free to jump in if you have questions.
This is Lisa, and I don't necessarily have a question. I know projections is just based on the best case that we know and what's happened in the past, and all of that is very up in the air right now. I would like to remind everybody that per our policy 714, which is I think our fund balance policy -2, I don't know why it's -2, but it is, that if we approve a budget that's that's this negative, which I would propose that we do. I support approving this budget, and I support all of the things that we added. I think we have to do that. But when we make that approval as a board, we are also at the same time directing the administration to undertake developing a financial plan that gets us back to balanced budget. And so
Bob and
that
I-
is an existing policy. And I know Jen knows that, and I know Bob is very much looking forward to this wonderful opportunity to excel. But just to point that out, that we made leading up to this point was, I think, for important things. And I support doing it. And now going into this next year, it's going to be important to have administrators lead us through that pros and cons and balancing free time.
And I'd like to go back to and I think Scott put it great at, I don't remember how many meetings ago that was, talking about the tactical versus strategic and how we knew we needed to add in these mental health positions. We knew we needed to add in more special ed teachers and what that was going to look like. And we knew that this kind of deficit was going to happen based on what we needed to add. And so as we looked to make these decisions to add this, how we continue to look at the big picture and how do we get out of this deficit? What does that look like? And what is our strategic plan to handle mental health issues that our students are facing, for one? And what does that look like? So I think we have a lot of situations that are going to be coming up, and I hope we're all ready for them. I think Bob looks ready.
Yeah, we've already started talking about it. Jen and I and the team at district have already started talking about it. I've already, as of today, kind of sent a message to building principals to make sure that they're well aware of where we are and what it is, because they're going to need to be a part of this, as well as probably some of our teaching and other staff. But there are going to be some difficult decisions to make as we move forward in the short term, because as you all are aware, a deficit spend in year 1 exponentially changes in year 2 and year 3 and year 4 if you don't do something sooner than later once you know that you're deficit spending. And so unfortunately, we're going to be in that conversation not too long from now. But we'll get there.
Yep. I have confidence in this board. So does anyone have any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing anything. All right, thank you, Jen. So the next bit up for discussion is talking about forming an ad hoc discipline policy committee. Just a little bit of background on this. The policy committee met, and we know that the discipline policy is one that we really need to talk about, but that this is something that needs input from other groups. And as a reminder, we have an agreement with the teachers in their last contract about the Behavioral Support Committee. And within that is the discussion that they would be a part of the discipline policy. And so, they would have already been a group that we had talked about bringing in to have these discussions, but just a reminder. And so we did talk about getting a group together to do this work. And so in discussions, since Scott is on the Behavioural Committee, that he would do work with the Discipline Policy Committee. And then since Brian is on the Policy Committee, that he would go into this one as well as our 2 board members. And so the behavioral support group that we have with the teachers does not allow us to have 2 board members on it. We are limited to 1. And so an additional board member to discuss this with and to talk it through and kind of come up with the policy around it. So the policy committee kind of wanted feedback, see how you felt about that, trying to get that started. Going from there. Stephanie or Brian, if I'm missing anything, please feel free to hop in and anything. So,
Yeah, my only question was about why this was coming, why this wasn't going to be dealt with inside of policy, and I think that's good to get Scott coming over from the behavior support. I just want to make sure, or I would like to encourage the group as it goes forward to make sure that we have ongoing legal consult during the development of this policy in particular, just to make sure that in good alignment. This really everybody, students, staff, very close to their daily practice, and I want to make sure we're square on that.
I think that's a great point. Brian, did you have something you wanted to add?
So I just picked up on that. So Lisa, I think the first thing you said is why it didn't stay within the policy committee.
I just had put myself as a personal note when I was reviewing the agenda, but I feel comfortable after Kelsey's present.
Oh,
explanation.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, that was the bottom
Yeah,
line.
and then that was it. And then my second piece was just to make sure that we have ongoing legal insight on this, just because I want to daily operational stuff and I want it to be really right.
No, absolutely. Not only legal input, but we're going to have to get even input from law enforcement. When do they step in? When do they not step in? That kind of thing. Absolutely.
And I think, Scott, with you being on that behavioral committee, if you can talk to the group and just see how they would like to be a part of this, since this is in their agreement, kind of figure out how to move forward with that.
Yeah, it was in their agreement for a 1-year period. So I think that's something that we will need to reach back out to them. It was, I believe it was part of a MOU.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we may need to re-engage with EM Hastings, see how they would like to proceed.
Okay, great. Sounds
Just
good.
as a heads up, just so you folks know, just as part of the policy committee work, I have already started digging into 506, and because of how long it's been since we had really kind of gone through it, it's kind of, let's just put it this way, there's a lot of pieces that need to be added and retooled and so on and so forth. So I think the sooner we figure out who all needs input on that, the better off we'll be. But I'm making a run at it now, just so you know. So at least we'll have something to start working off of.
Yeah, well, then I will leave that to, as an ad hoc committee, we don't need to approve that or anything. So I will leave that to Scott and Brian to figure out how to get that set up and organized. And obviously, Bob and I can continue to discuss, and Stephanie with the policy committee, and figure out if there's a specific way that this should be organized. So thank you very much. All right. Next up is, wait, oh no, I clicked something. Okay. Administrative reports. So school board committee reports. We'll start with student enrollment. And that's just our snapshot that we get every month, just for the board to take a look at, or for anyone who wants to look on board book, just giving the update on students have transferred either out of the district or into the district. And then our enrollment in June of 2019 was 4254, and our June 2020 enrollment is 4218. So shy of a drop of 40. So the facilities committee summary. The facilities committee met on June 1st, and we really continued our discussions around the high school retaining wall, which I had brought up last month as well, and how our initial budget for this was about $5,700, and now the budget looks like it would be $35,000 to upwards of $50,000, depending on what type of repair we go with. The committee felt that we were comfortable going up to the $50,000 mark to repair this, but that we would also like more information on long-term maintenance of whichever plan we're coming up with, So for example, the rocks that we have there now, they're not sure that they've ever been resealed. And so that's something that should really be resealed every year or two. And so that's part of that issue that we're seeing them breaking down like that. So with whatever plan we come up with, we also want to have that maintenance plan in place to be taking care of it, because we don't want to come back in another couple of years needing to, again, repair this wall. The middle school auditorium bathrooms came in about 6% higher than projected. The facilities committee felt comfortable with this and green-lighted moving forward with the improvements. This will include updating the bathrooms to comply with the ADA requirements, as well as increasing privacy. The middle school administration did mention that they were interested in adding in an additional privacy bathroom somewhere more towards the middle of the school. They didn't give a specific bathroom in particular, and so we did ask them to kind of come back with their first choice or second choices, just to see that would be and what the cost would look like. We also continue to look at our updated list of bond projects, and that has been narrowed down based on what can be covered by long-term facility maintenance dollars. And the facilities committee, we actually asked to kind of go back to that community list that was created at the beginning of this project, because we had initially struck out some ideas in order to narrow it down, and to kind of bring that back up and see if there are any of those projects that we would like to move in at this point, since we do have remaining bond dollars. So it's kind of the summary. Just anything, Lisa or Dave, please feel free to. Okay. Do you have any questions?
I don't know if it falls under the facility committee or where it falls, so just looking for some guidance on this. The whole incident at Todd Field, is that something the facility committee takes on in terms of our insurance and how that gets taken care of? And where does that sit? I don't know where that even camps out.
I believe that lays on Cam's desk. That feels like operational to me.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that would be
But
something
if Cam does not want to raise his hand, this would be a good time to unmute.
But I do think that if we talk about adding in any of those, what they're called, that might fall on facilities there. But
right. Where does that sit? Since you were about to unmute there, bud.
Well, everything has to go through insurance. So Jen is the contact that insurance goes through. So I've been getting quotes on everything to send to her to get approval from the insurance adjuster. So we've had a couple contractors come look at the field. We had the manufacturer come look at the field. We had 4 fencing contractors take a look at the fence on the outside, and we've got 3 companies looking at the stands themselves. There's an I-beam that was twisted, and it's a big safety concern, especially if we have 200 people in that section of the stands. It has to be safe for them to be in. So we're just waiting for the manufacturer for the stands to get back to us so that we can get those quotes off to the insurance company.
And as a follow-up to that, Cam, I hate to be the guy to ask this question, but is our insurance going to subrogate back to the driver's insurance on this over the deductible piece?
That I'm not sure. That might be a better question for Jen. I don't believe the driver had insurance.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and we don't formally know the answer yet to that. So I'm sure we'll find out soon.
Thank you.
okay, any other questions? Then moving on, The right along with facilities is the building construction fund update. Jen, did you want to go over that with us just quick?
Sure can. Okay, so this is kind of the same format we've looked at for the last couple months. That top section lists the projects that have been completed, and then it shows the remaining funds. So if we look at the total of what's remaining and we add in the contingency that we haven't yet identified to go elsewhere in the interest, it's at about $5.3 million. The second section is projects that are in process, and that's got the big middle school improvements, which we have to just keep remembering in the end, we think is probably going to go slightly over budget. And then just the ones in design, there's a little over $1 million in design. The future projects, so I have been line items, so I transferred out a contingency for like the early childhood improvements, the high school athletic field parking lot addition, and the addition to the high school retaining wall. At this point, we're about 83% complete on the overall bond dollars.
All right, thank you. I appreciate getting the update each month. And so thank you for that. And thank you, Lisa, for putting in the request to have that quick update every month. All right, any questions on that? All right. Next up is the policy committee. So Stephanie.
So the policy committee, we met twice since I believe our last meeting. So May 29th and June 18th. I know at our work session, we talked about a few different things, in particular with merging 510, the student travel, and 610 with the field trips. When we met again on June 18th, we talked pretty extensively about what that actually looks like. And we collectively came together and want to make a recommendation to move forward with this policy, knowing that, so, we talk about this tactical plan and then the strategic plan. We need to have something in place, or we should have something in place now. And then when we have our strategic plan, we'll definitely revisit that to make sure that it aligns. But what we discussed with merging 510 and 610, it now becomes 610, and defining why and when the school board would sponsor a trip. So, Kelsey, do you want to? I'm trying to find the words to, or maybe Brian too. When it comes to like an extended trip, when we would approve it and when we wouldn't.
Right.
So defining that, do you know? Do you want to help me out?
So, right. So we had talked about if it's in line, and this will be easier once we have a strategic plan in, set up. But if a trip is in line with what our strategic plan is and what our goals as a district are, then the school board would approve it, and the school board can take the initiative to kind of be the organizer behind it. And that would kind of cover that equity piece that we had talked about if the school board decides to approve it. If the school board decides not to approve a trip, that doesn't mean that the students can't go on it. That just means that the school board is not sponsoring it, that it wouldn't be publicized by the schools, and that that would be organized outside of kind of our role and outside of administration, and that would just be organized separately through whoever wants to run it with like a travel agency. If a teacher would like to go on that trip as a chaperone, then it would be on their time, and they would be able to work with the travel agency and things like that. And so it's just letting it be that the school board can decide when to sponsor a trip and when not to. And then that decision will be made more clear once we have that strategic plan set up.
Say, we added in verbiage regarding who has the discretion to cancel a trip. So making sure that we have it in writing that the superintendent has the ability to, at their discretion, to cancel a trip. And then we fine-tuned the verbiage regarding the crisis management plan. And I believe in board book, it's towards the very end. I believe it's the last policy in board book. You'll be able to take a look at that if you haven't already, to see where we put that in. Just making sure that, okay, you need to have a crisis plan before this goes forward, before it can get approved. And then, like with a lot of policies, there's policies that feed into different policies. So the reference to 903 with visitors to school district buildings and background checks. So when we have a chaperone, when we have an adult, I believe we put in over the age of 18. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelsey and Brian, but even if it's a senior who just graduated and they're going to a summer trip, they're over the age of 18, they may be subject to a background check. I think we're online there. Just making it clear that we're doing the appropriate background checks on adults that are going on these trips. So that then feeds into 903 and making sure that we have the appropriate verbiage in that policy for those checks, for those background checks. And I'm highlighting the big portions that we talked about. Brian had already talked about, and Kelsey, we discussed the discipline 506. That's another really big piece that we're going to have to sit down and really, and then it came out that we should probably do this ad hoc committee to make sure that this is a fine-tuned product before we approve anything. The facility use procedures, so 902A and 903, Carrie Gore has discussed this with an attorney, and it has the appropriate wording in that policy for us to feel comfortable making a recommendation to approve it so that it meets the intent of equal treatment and that it's legal too. And then with 903A, I don't believe this is in one of our items for review later. Not quite yet. It's getting there. It's a product that is getting there. That is the procedures for school visitors and volunteers. But we talked about that, and yeah, what we talked about specifically with that policy that I want to bring to your attention is that the approving or denying volunteers or visitors, there's like a list of, when we do background checks, what kind of things might flag somebody from preventing them from visiting or volunteering their time. We want to add in their, like criminal convictions. A traffic violation, probably not going to be a big issue, but if they have a DWI, we're not going to ask them to drive a vehicle with students in it. Along those lines, adding in, I didn't see anything in there regarding domestic assaults or abuse type of convictions, regardless of what level it's at. So we were asking to add that in as another criteria, because that is statistically, it's an issue. Like if there's a domestic abuse concern, it's probably a systemic issue all around that could affect the kiddos. Trying to think what else. Brian and Kelsey, please chime in if I am missing anything. I've talked about 506 and 418. That is the drug-free workplace. We want to make a recommendation that this is adopted before the fall. And what was added into there was the cannabis-based products verbiage, so i.e. CBD oil. And that's to protect the nurses from administering non-FDA approved drugs. So if you look at that policy, you'll see that we put that information in there. So that's what I have for that update.
I also believe it was part of that policy stuff that on that one that we have to communicate that one very carefully to make sure it's understood that the student can't even have in their possession. If it's something that parents wish administered, they have to actually leave the campus grounds. You can't even be on campus doing it.
You're right, Brian. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And it's important that, you know, we can't, if it's not approved by the FDA, we really need to be careful about bringing it onto campus to make sure that it is drug-free. Yeah.
Mary Ellen, did you have something that you wanted to hop in there with?
Yes. So Stephanie, you're a nurse, right?
No, that would be Becky.
That's Becky.
Yes, the state does have parameters set for schools on that what you were just talking about with the marijuana and the hemp, the products that are containing that substance. Also, when you're thinking about field trips, I want you to consider students that have health conditions. My understanding is we cannot discriminate against students who have health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a student that has a specific health need, we need to be able to provide for their health care while on a field trip. Sometimes there have been issues like we'll hear about something at the last minute. I'm speaking as a nurse here. And it's like, oh, well, we're just walking this way. No, that's still a field trip. You're leaving the school grounds. We need to provide for the students' health. They have diabetes. No, you can't just go. So technically speaking, to be able to stop that field trip from happening if we cannot meet those students' needs, because we would be discriminating for that child. They could not go because of their health condition. So I don't know what you're putting in that, but I just wanted to make sure that that was on your radar.
Yep. Thank you. And we have brought that up in talking about the policies and about the equity concerns. And that's one of the reasons that we wanted to distinguish between if the school board approves something, if it's an approved trip, because if the school board does not approve a trip, then that doesn't happen. We don't have to ensure equity. And so for us, that was one of those things where we said, we don't want any kiddo. If this is a trip that the school board feels is part of our curriculum, is part of the experience of school, we wanted to approve that so that we could continue to make sure that we could provide those kids anything they needed, whether that's for a medical condition or an interpreter or anything like that. And so that was in our discussions. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Comments there?
Lisa?
Lisa?
Yeah, I have a super broad, embarrassingly basic question, but I figure I'll just expose my lack of knowledge to all. For that summary, Stephanie, that helped a lot. I think I'll still have some individual questions as we go through each policy. But I've noticed over the last couple of months that I've seen some language about mandatory policies that are getting reviewed at the policy committee and brought in. Actually, I have 2 points. One, could somebody clarify for me what mandatory means in this case? Is that a state statute requirement? And then 2, this excellent conversation that we just got to watch with Mary Ellen stepping in with her insights. I know that you've already considered those issues in regard to that policy, but on the broadest level, I want us to make sure that the administrators that are closely touched by policy, and I'll bring this up on some specific examples later, the administrators closest touched to policy are participating in the review. Whether that's just sending it to them in advance of the policy committee and saying, hey, we're taking a look at field trips. We're thinking about healthcare. Are we in the right place? And I think maybe that's happened on a couple of other things recently that got brought forward, and maybe that hasn't quite happened yet. And so just as a practice, that would be great. But if somebody could just explain to me what mandatory means in this setting, I would be very happy. Thank you.
I guess I can jump in. There are certain pieces of policy that are mandated by the state, that have to be part of policy, and some of those things can actually affect our funding if they're not indeed in there.
So is that a statutory requirement? Is it statutory that says you have to have a policy?
Yes.
I don't know, 613 or something. I'm just making that
Yes.
number up. It's probably a
Yes.
real number, but okay.
Yes, some are mandatory.
But it doesn't
some we
have
can
to be.
skip.
It doesn't have to be the MSBA based policy. You just have to have a policy with that
Correct.
number and that topic.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
It's just the MSBA policies. Typically, their boilerplate language is a good jumping off point, but no, it does not have to be per that. It just has to be in there in some form.
Yeah, and Jeff had noticed that we were missing some of these policies, and so we've made a priority getting them approved. Other questions for the policy committee? I don't see anything. All right, so then we will move into our action items for tonight, beginning with the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move.
Can I ask Stephanie, does that include change order number 12? As it's recommended in board book, that the motion is the consent agenda, including
Yes,
that?
that's what I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you. I'll second that.
Yep, so that includes the change orders, bills payable, and the personnel report. All right, is there any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, items for individual action. As you can see, there are a lot of policies. So the policies, if we're not comfortable with approving them tonight, we can move them to an additional reading, and that's totally fine. So first up is policy 534, which I'm trying to pull up.
It's the meal.
It's not loading for me, Kelsey. Are you getting?
No, me neither. Yeah, it's not loading for me either.
The first page loads for me, but I can't go beyond that.
Mine either. That is unfortunate.
Okay. All right. Wonder if it'll load. Well, it probably won't load on a different device if you're not having any luck either. So just reload my page and see if that'll work. All right, I'm still not working for me, which is unfortunate because this is the one that we've done many times. So I can try to come back to that one.
None of the policies on board book are loading for me. I don't know if anybody else is having issues.
You know what? None of mine are either. All right. Going to
In the
log.
bottom corner of mine, it says something like waiting for PDF sparkdata.com. So I presume it's a board book website problem.
Mhm.
Did log out. I'm going to try to log back in.
All right. Is Becky on still?
I just texted Becky. I'm going to see if she can
Yeah,
send them to all of you as a PDF.
Okay,
then
mine
maybe
just
share it.
opened.
Mine just opened.
I was gonna say, it just as we were sitting here, the buffering stopped, and now I can open it.
Yeah, mine just opened and I was pulling up the drive where we have everything too. So I just need to get on to board book on my other device and I can share the screen too.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great because it's still, oh, nope, there, magic. Okay.
Had to think today.
All right, so policy 534 is the unpaid meal charges. And so we've been discussing this one since we could meet in person, which is a long time ago. And so we haven't really made changes on this. Let's see, does anyone have any questions about?
I think the big change that we made, well, it's not really even a big change. It was just a verbiage thing. So it used to say families, and now it says like parent/guardian. So that was a big one from the last meetings that we were able to modify.
I'll move to approve that one.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approving policy 534, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So next up, these policies are up for a second reading, which also means we can approve them tonight. So first up is policy 721, which is the grant guidance for federal revenue sources. So again, these are all just mandatory policies that we need to have. So motion to approve policy 721.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up is policy 620, credit for learning. So this is the one that we discussed last month where we had gone in to talk about the grades and how we had removed that section from MSBA's policy because we don't weight grades. Do we have a motion to approve this policy?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. And carries. Next up is policy 612. Again, this is still a mandatory policy, and this is the development of parent and family engagement policies for Title I programs.
So move.
Second.
All right,
Can I,
is there-
point of
Yeah.
discussion on this one? So this is an example of two things. One, this is a policy directing the development of a policy. We're directing the administrators of the school sites to develop a policy to do this. And maybe I didn't catch that on my first read last month, but all out policies are developed by school. I would certainly feel more comfortable if that policy was developed by the team of elementary principals and was uniform across our 3 sites, and a similar practice was used. And then there's not a timeline in this or a checkpoint with the board. It's just a direction to do it. I think that a timeline would be helpful. And then on the broader level, this is a policy that I wonder if it has already been coordinated with the elementary principals. This would be an example of one where it directly impacts their daily work. And I would like to know that they have at least read it and had an opportunity to provide feedback before we get to an adoption point.
Just a point of clarification, and this might be with that. So administrators can't develop policy. Only the board can develop policy. Administration can develop a procedure.
Okay, so then the language probably needs to be clarified in here, because this, if you read it, the only reason I say that, and I would tend to agree with you, Bob, And that's what caught my eye this read through, is that it does say school administrators have a policy to do this. So I think there might just need to be a little bit of clarification. And then I would appreciate that there was that I knew that in our case, elementary principals had reviewed it and that it was done by the group of the three. Some sort of cool name, but the group of three, so that as families moved or as boundaries moved, that the way that they engaged with the school felt common.
Right. And I know Jeff had reached out to Matt, and I also know that we're kind of in this funky transition time here with Jeff leaving and Bob coming. And so absolutely, like you mentioned, that maybe there's some wording we need to clean up. And also if Bob would like to, reach out to the elementary principals and make sure that this is in line. Becky.
Just brief here. I do know that Matt Esterby did get back to Jeff and let him know that it was okay, that everything was okay as it was written, as it aligns with how they do things now. So look over it and get back to Jeff.
I mean, I guess for the sake of having a mandatory policy where we're supposed to have one, it's not beyond the pale for me to approve this as it stands now, with the idea that it would be on the very short list to be. I don't necessarily feel like it. I mean, maybe we go back and bring it back in a month. That might be easy too. Just clarifying all schools, not singular schools.
I think Lisa has a point. I think we want to make sure the verbiage is. We wanted to say. I think we want to make sure of that, because we want to make sure that we're putting the right things in administrator hands and we're keeping the right things in our hands that are supposed to be there without any ambiguity in the language we're using.
And I think we've already waited this long for a policy. We can wait one more month as we make sure it's done right. I don't have any issues with that. I would rather wait a month and push through the right policy then. Not. So we will move this one to a third reading for next month. All right, so the last of our mandatory policies is 427, which is workload limits for certain special ed teachers.
At the end of the day, this is the one that, do you want me to wait to discuss till we've made a motion on it? This is just struck me as odd, because I think what it says is the director of special services gets to decide about workload, and they should decide these certain things. They should decide it based on these certain things, which I think is our current practice. I'm not, and maybe Dave has something he could contribute here, but I don't know why this gets its own policy. Why wouldn't you say the same thing about any, wouldn't a food service person have a policy about this?
And I think Dave is still on, right? Okay.
I am here. Yep. So Lisa is correct. That is our practice right now, outside of the caseload limits that we have that are already defined by statute. And so we have language that already speaks to certain early childhood caseload limits and caseload limits for some center-based programming like our LEAP and our Bridge and our STARS programs and programs like that. For the majority of our special ed programming, that is left up to the discretion of, the director, the assistant director of special ed, in conjunction with, the superintendent or assistant superintendent to make recommendations based on what is reasonable, because there's a lot of variables involved with the decision making with that. It's not just a numbers game always with that, like it is with some of the other higher need groups of students. And so that is our practice. Yes, Lisa.
Do you know, Dave, why this policy exists at a mandatory level? We have to have it, and it's our current practice, and that's fine.
Is this the, forgive me, but is this the MSBA language that we're looking at right now that you guys just read off? Okay.
Yeah, it's the model policy workload limits for certain special education teachers. It's a page and a half
Okay.
of saying this is what we currently do.
I actually wasn't aware that you guys were going to come over that part tonight. Otherwise, I would have looked over the policy language. But I do know that some other districts have adopted the MSBA language with that, even though it speaks to what our practice currently is. I also don't know, to your question, why it even needs to exist when that's kind of the standard operating practice when it comes to doing that for most cases.
Yeah. Okay. And the language says, you know, collective bargaining agreement is unaffected. This is all just a bunch of definitions and then a statement of things to be considered.
We do. I mean, Sarah and I, and soon to be Megan and I, do workload analyses in the winter and spring before we're making recommendations for staffing or shifting, and we're always doing shifts of special ed staff because of that. And so when it comes to most positions, resource case managers, speech language, OT, a whole host of positions, we take a lot of factors into account as to how we're determining what the appropriate level of staffing is when it comes to that.
Right, thank you.
Bet.
Questions on this policy? Do we have a motion to approve policy 427? All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign? Carries. All right, now these policies are new or substantially revised. They are not mandatory. Just to clarify that, since we're moving into these ones. And since this is the second reading, these ones can also be approved tonight if we wish. So the first policy is 408, subpoena of a school district employee. And so this is something that was on the docket for about a year now. And it's now come to the board twice. This is its second time, but the policy committee was looking at this last year. Just for a little bit of background. This is just clarifying some of those things. You look
And
like
as
you
I
have a-
remember, I'm skimming it right now, and I was actually looking for the one that was attached to the last reading. As I remember, this is straight up MSBA model policy. There's nothing specific to Hastings or unique to Hastings. Okay,
No.
that was my recollection.
No, it was just one of those we noticed we didn't have. So. So is there a motion to approve policy 408?
So move.
Second.
All right, any more discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign. Carries. Next up is policy 419, tobacco-free environment and electronic delivery advices. So this was really updating for vaping. So do we have a motion to approve policy 419?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, next up, policy 515, protection and privacy of pupil records. And just a reminder, this was so that the library could get our students' library cards. So that's why this one had come up. Have a motion to approve policy 515.
So moved.
Second.
Right, any discussion? Those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Next up, policy 535, service animals in schools. Do we have a motion to approve this policy?
Moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. So these policies are now for the first reading, so they would not be passed tonight. And so that's policy 901, which is community education. So if there are any questions or comments on this for the policy committee, and then we'll take those back to us for our next meeting. Changes you see need to be made. Anything on this policy? No? No? I'll give just another minute. Okay. All right, and then the next one for our first reading is the 902, the use of school district facilities and equipment. And so this is what Stephanie had mentioned Carrie Gore had been working on. And so there was a timeline on this of trying to get this approved by July. So if there are changes, we would want to make them now so that we can bring those changes to you at the next board meeting so it could get approved. See anything? Okay.
Nope.
Great. And so then 902A, the form is just kind of an amendment or an addendum that would be put on to policy 902, which is just information that's already sent out with community ed.
Yeah, and I just wanted to confirm, and I feel confident that I heard Stephanie say this, but I just wanted to confirm that we did get a legal review on this, specifically around the definition of the classifications, because I know that was an issue in the briefing prior to the school year about revenues and expenditures. So as long as that's done, I had nothing else.
Harry consulted legal counsel with this one. All right, and so then we have the policy 903, which is the visitors to school district buildings and sites. Any comments on this policy?
So